Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another video. This is the week of the Bad Batch Season 2 Episode 3, but today we're going to be talking about The Mandalorian. Following the leaks about the Praetorian Guards, I wanted to focus on something a lot of people ask me about, the general role of Moff Gideon, what he's doing, and how he plays into the story of the third season. In the past, we've had sporadic rumours from various sources, as well as comments from Giancarlo Esposito himself. And while we do know a few bits and bobs about his story arc, his revenge on the New Republic, breaking out of prison, that kind of thing, we know very little about his endgame, his motivations. I did try theorizing about it in a video I made last week, but given the new information, I think things are a bit clearer. We're gonna start by laying out everything we know about him in the upcoming third season, some of the rumors, and then we're gonna start connecting the dots. This is going to be huge, so no more jibber jabber, let's dive straight into it. It's going to get pretty dark. So first of all, he's rumoured to be getting black and red Mandalorian armour, along with a helmet that has Maul horns on it, just like the armourer. Next up, he's going to be continuing his cloning project that we saw in Chapter 12, to try and bring back Palpatine, and he's going to have 5 Praetorian Guards, who also sport Mando-style helmets, so let's try connecting some of these dots. Now the most obvious part of this is the cloning project. He was a Palpatine loyalist, he still is, and the faction of the Remnant that's trying to bring him back. Earlier in the timeline during the Bad Batch Season 2, this would have been on Mount Tantiss when Palpatine was still alive, because before his death, he was obsessed with immortality, as we heard him talk about in Revenge of the Sith, but also in the James Luceno book Darth Plagueis, and apart from Wayland, he had other facilities too, most of these unknown. After his death in Return of the Jedi, during the Mandalorian timeline, the Empire still had Mount Tantiss, but the Remnant had other cloning labs too, such as the one we saw in Chapter 12 on Nevarro. I wonder where else the Remnant has laboratories. Where is their central base? Could it be on Exegol, as we saw in the Rise of Skywalker much further down the timeline? As we know from the comics, Palpatine was already planning his contingency there after the events of The Empire Strikes Back. Or maybe the Remnant is working somewhere outside of known space, maybe in the New Beyond, which is the mysterious, unexplored part of the galaxy that we're gonna see in the Ahsoka show. Wherever Moff Gideon is doing his experiments, he wants to do them out of sight of the New Republic. He doesn't want to go to prison again or get caught, especially now the cloning project is nearing fruition. So now we come onto the Praetorian Guards. Making Star Wars said these are eventually going to work for Snoke, but right now, they're Moff Gideon's bodyguards. They're well trained and they're going to live well into the sequel era, once the First Order's been established. But why do they have Mandalorian helmets, and what is the link? Well, my theory, as you guys may know, is that the reason Moff Gideon wears Mandalorian armor is because he's a wannabe Mando who admired their culture. I seriously doubt he actually was a Mandalorian, although it is possible, and I assume if he was, due to the rumoured horns on his helmet, he may have been a Maul loyalist, unless of course he stole the helmet from someone else, and this could lead to a fantastic rivalry and duel if he meets the armourer, who we also know very little about. Now somewhere along the way, Gideon may have become aligned with the ideas of Mandalorian super commandos on the side of the Empire, possibly even Gar Saxon himself, which explains A, why he wanted the Darksaber from Bo-Katan in the first place, who was handed it by Sabine Wren, who won it from Saxon in Star Wars Rebels, and B, explains the Maul connection. And so based on this theory, I reckon the origins of the Praetorian Guards, at least the first ones in this show, were originally Imperial super commandos for Gar Saxon, at least the ones who survived. In either case, from all of this evidence, I think Gideon has multiple aims. First of all, he wants order in the galaxy once again, in the form of Palpatine returning. And secondly, aside from personal power, he might try and stop Mando and the other clans who are trying to restore their homeworld. If he had a personal investment in the Imperial destruction of Mandalore, why would he want to restore it? Now, as a couple of fans noted, if he's trying to clone Palpatine at the moment, who else might he be in contact with? And this is where I believe Snoke might already be in the picture. Palpatine's essence might already be established, and Gideon might already be answering to some kind of prototype of the revived Emperor. I also think back to what Giancarlo Esposito said in Canada at Fan Expo, when he talked about personality changes to Moff Gideon in Season 3. He's a know-it-all, and he doesn't want to listen to advice from Pershing or anyone else, so this might mean he goes too far. I think Season 3 is going to spend a couple of episodes where he breaks out of prison, but he's got others working for him in the shadows, doing his bidding, working on the projects and advancing the plans to take down Mon Mothma Reformer and the New Republic. Gideon is obsessed with reinstating the Empire, and I should make it clear, this has nothing to do with Thrawn or Morgan Elsbeth. Their aims are very different, and Gideon is a very different sort of villain who has very little to do with Thrawn and the New Beyond. That storyline is being saved for the Ahsoka show, and that clarification should be made so we don't just assume it's all related. I really don't think Gideon and Thrawn are connected in any way, but eventually they might be. At the moment though, they're very different, doing different things. The Imperial Remnants each have their own factions. And for Thrawn, the focus is on the New Beyond and building an army out of the Night Sisters, the ones who use a very different kind of magic, who do not originate on Dathomir. So the scope of the Mandoverse is going to be fascinating. Various character arcs, various stories, and various motives. Now just before we move on guys, I want to address the elephant in the room surrounding the report on the Praetorian Guards. Now while a lot of fans, myself included, are very excited about what this might do to bridge the gap between the trilogies, many fans are upset that The Mandalorian is leading to the sequels and it's going to be very overt about it. Well, what I will say to those fans is to view it as a big opportunity for Jon Favreau to salvage the perception of those films. He's adding meaningful context and build-up, similar to what Dave Filoni did with the Clone Wars series after the prequels, and what they end up doing in The Mandalorian might change how we see the sequel era, because we're going to have a much greater understanding of how the galaxy ended up the way it did by the time of The Force Awakens. Now I do understand that to some fans the sequels are unsalvageable, but personally I'd say give it a go. I'm actually quite looking forward to what they're gonna do, and remember guys, Snoke is not necessarily in the show, so for fans dismayed, I wouldn't write off the show just yet. You never know, it might be amazing. And so now, my dear friends, an update for Jedi Survivor, which now is only 2 months away. In a new interview with Game Informer, Kestis actor Cameron Monaghan talked about how the story of Jedi Survivor connects to the wider Star Wars canon, but also stands on its own. He said the game is going to be conscious of the established lore, but also satisfying and interesting in its own way, and not only the time period before A New Hope, but the High Republic as well. In his own words, he said, "I think we have a bunch of really big questions that we're asking with this one. It's funny because it's this dual-sided thing. You have an established lore, character, canon, all of that stuff, and you're so excited about it. But also at the end of the day, it needs to exist and be satisfying and interesting regardless." So in other words, standing on its own right. And so finally guys, we have some awesome concept art for Andor Season 1. We begin with the ISB headquarters on Coruscant. We see various officers, many of which didn't make the final cut, some in white and other in the darker colours that we're going to see Dedra Meero in Season 2. And so then we have a couple of shots of the prison on Narkina 5. Really awesome, but also quite haunting. So share your thoughts in the comments down below guys of this and everything we spoke about in today's video. If you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you always.